In the last slide, we were talking about the biotic components of nature. Now we'll talk about the abiotic components of ecosystem. Now in the abiotic component, I have discussed previously, it includes all the non-living components of ecosystem, like air, you can see in the slide, air, water, soil, minerals, sunlight, temperature, wind, etc. all come under the abiotic components of ecosystem. So when you talk about the ecosystem, I have told you that it is the interaction between the biotic as well as the abiotic component. यानी कि biotic component भी होना पड़ेगा, abiotic component भी होना पड़ेगा. Both have to interact in order to have a better ecosystem. So this is about the ecosystem, its types, its components, etc. Hope you have understood. We'll go to the next topic now. The next topic is very important. It is called as the food chain. Now, when you talk about the food chain, you must have seen such chains in your lower classes also. In your lower classes, you have drawn such chains. At those times, we were only asked to draw. Ye draw karo, ye draw karo. But significance I'll explain you now. Now when you draw a food chain or you talk about a food chain, it is basically flow of energy. A food chain is basically a flow of energy that one organism takes from the other organism, or one organism takes from the previous organism. So here also there is flow of food energy. As you know, food gives us energy, so some form of energy is there. So one organism takes energy from the previous organism, and so on. The food chain gradually grows up. So you can see here, we'll talk about one example. You can see one producer here. The producer is the grass. The producer is the grass here, and it is consumed by a deer. And the deer is finally eaten up by the lion. So you see, deer and lion both are consumers, but we will categorize the consumers now. Deer is the primary consumer because it has eaten the producer first, and the lion is the secondary consumer because it did not eat the producer directly. It has eaten an organism which has consumed the producer. Please understand now. See, primary consumer are those organisms which feeds on the producer directly, whereas secondary consumers are those which do not feed on the producer directly. So therefore they are the secondary consumers. So you can see here also the grass is there. Grass has produced its food, and the deer has consumed the grass. Means kuch energy grass ka deer ko mila, and finally the lion eats the deer. So kuch energy lion ko bhi mila deer se. So this is how the flow of food energy takes place from one organism to the other, and so on. So if you see all the food chains, it will generally start with a producer, because producer is the organism that has energy and produces energy on its own with the help of sunlight. क्वेश्चन आ सकता है एग्जाम में कि हमेशा प्रोड्यूसर से ही फूड चेन क्यों स्टार्ट होता है? Why does any food chain start with a producer? Because producer produces the food with the help of sunlight. The food chain cannot start with a consumer, because consumer cannot produce food. Producer produces food with the help of sunlight, and finally the consumers will feed on the producers. So in a food chain, you can see one organism gets food from the previous organism, and finally the food chain grows. In the second example, if you see, you can see the grass is the producer. It is eaten by a primary consumer, which is the insect. You can see here, this example is a bit different. Here the primary consumer is an insect because it feeds on the grass directly. The frog is the secondary consumer because the frog is eating the insect. And finally the snake, here we have one more category of consumer. which is called as the tertiary consumer, means तीसरा consumer. Tertiary consumer, the snake is eating the frog is eating the insect, and the insect is feeding on the grass. So this is how you can see the food chain grows. We'll go to one more example. You can see a grass producer. The moth is an insect again. It is the primary consumer. Moth is eaten by the frog. The frog is the secondary consumer. Frog is eaten by the snake. Snake is the tertiary consumer, and the snake is eaten or consumed by hawk. Hawk is a bird, just like an eagle. Hawk is a bird, hunting bird. So hawk has eaten or consumed the snake. So hawk is also a consumer, but it is the fourth type of consumer called as the quaternary consumer, means chotha consumer. Quaternary means chotha, fourth. So you can see here that the food chain can be up to secondary consumer, it can be up to tertiary consumer, it can be up to quaternary consumer also.